Hi, everybody. I am State Senator John Cronin. We are broadcasting for the first time Cronin's Corner at the new FATV studios. And I am joined today with my guest, the fearless leader of the Fitchburg Historical Society. Susan, thank you so much for joining today.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
So before we dive into it, can you tell us what the mission of the Historical Society is here in Fitchburg?
Yeah, absolutely. The Historical Society's mission is to preserve, protect, and interpret Fitchburg's history. That means that we save everything that is about Fitchburg's history. We take good care of it so that then when people need it, we can bring it out for them and they can research the history. And historians use it, local families use it, new business owners and new residents all use the Historical Society to learn a little bit more about what happened before their time in Fitchburg.
Who we are and where we come from.
Absolutely.
Right? What year was the society founded?
It was founded in 1892, so that means it's 131 years old. In fact, it was in February, so it's a full 131 years, yeah. And because of that, it's very well known. Fitchburg was a center for the Civil War, and it was really the Civil War generation who said, gee, we want to make sure that the Civil War and our role in the Civil War isn't forgotten, that we save that history. And at the same time, 1890s was the time that Fitchburg was more than half immigrant. And so there was a sense that among the founders, they wanted to gather together the information about what does it mean to live in New England, a city like this that lived through the Revolutionary War, that was one of the first places for industry in America, and then lived through the Civil War. And so that's why they started the Historical Society. So now, of course, in the 130 years since then, we're collecting all of the history from today's families, too.
And it's pretty remarkable to think about. But you think about maybe 4 or 5 old-timers sitting around a table in the 1890s, what they lived and what they saw in their lifetime in terms of service in the Civil War and the abolition movement, the Underground Railroad,
Exactly.
probably the first train to come through the city. I mean,
we actually have somebody who wrote up his reminiscence of riding on the train in the late 1830s, I think it was. He was a little kid.
Right.
And so he actually remembers that they were so worried that there might be a train coming from the other direction that every train that went out had a team of horses on the road near it walking ahead of it so that they could warn anybody who was coming in the other direction to stop. And so it was just to be super safe.
I mean, we have such a fascinating manufacturing legacy here,
Yes.
And really across all the gateway cities, your Lawrence, Lowell, Fitchburg. But how did the Industrial Revolution really transform the city of Fitchburg in ways that we can still kind of see today?
Well, one thing is it was really, really early in Fitchburg. The technology came straight from Slater's Mills. So it was actually, we have a great write-up about how it was brought here, that the man who brought it to Fitchburg sort of stole it from Slater, as Slater had stolen it from England, and came and sold it to the city fathers and then wouldn't give it to them. And so they had to... but then he got drunk, and they were able to get it from him and things.
Sounds like there's a story there. There's a story.
There's a lot, but that was very early. That was 1813, and what that meant is that textile mills got started as soon as there was automatic textile making.
And it was all the Nashua River.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
It was all the power source and
exactly. It's because Fitchburg is on a steep part of the river. They were able to harness the power from the river over and over again. And it means that even in the early 1800s, way before the Civil War, you had factories all lining the river. And that meant that they needed more people. And so people moved from the farms in New England, where it was a very hard life and very isolated and things. Young people from those farms wanted to live in the city.
Yeah.
And it was cleaner work, more interesting work to work in one of these factories. So people started streaming into Fitchburg.
Which was a time of incredible growth, I'm sure.
Exactly, yeah. The thing that's unusual about Fitchburg is that many places, if we think of Well, Lawrence and Lowell definitely came later. Their
Right.
history was quite a bit later. But a lot of these communities are just one industry, just textiles. But Fitchburg has been sort of unique that they had a huge
Ivor
variety.
Johnson and,
That's right, and
Yep.
machine making, and as well as paper started early, and it kept right on going. So a lot of these companies that we're talking about, the textile companies were here more than 100 years, but also the paper companies are still here. They've been here 200 years, and a lot of these others were here for a long, long time period. There's actually one of my favorite stories is a man who started a machine company here in Fitchburg. And I'm sorry, I read it so long ago, I don't remember which one. But when he was a little kid, when he was 13 years old, he was from Bath, Maine, and he worked on a ship, on a whaling ship, as a captain's boy. And he's told the story that when he was in China, he's 13 years old, he's in China in the ports, and he saw an engine in China, this huge engine, and it said Fitchburg, Massachusetts.
Wow.
And he said, that's where I want to go. I want to go where they can make engines like that. And I often say to people that Fitchburg was really like the Silicon Valley of the 1800s, that people knew that they could come here, and you had that river power, you had skilled workers, you had people like like Alva Crocker starting banks, and it's sort of like venture capital. They were investing in the other businesses, but the big thing was you knew you could find trained workers here.
Skilled workforce. Right.
And so all sorts of people who wanted to invent things or who wanted to become wealthy came out here to start their business.
And you think, when you really look back and think, I mean, it was a time where all the institutions, the cultural institutions, the education, Fitchburg State University, Fitchburg Art Museum, or the Fay Club, I mean, you name it, they really trace back to the Gilded Age in the late 19th century in so many ways.
Yes, exactly. So what happened is Fitchburg kept growing. I actually did a chart one time of the population, and so from like 1760 to 1840, you see it going like this.
Yeah.
And that looked very impressive. But then from the Civil War to 1910, it went like
that.
Straight up.
Right.
Yeah, and that was really the Gilded Age, as you say. That was when everything expanded so hugely.
And it was really the commerce capital of the entire region here,
really
right
was.
North of Worcester.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, but
Okay.
I'm fascinated. If you could, and this is how my brain works, right?
Okay.
If you could time travel, what period of Fitchburg's history would you like to go back to and spend a weekend?
Ooh, if it's just a week, oh my goodness, that is so hard. Maybe because it's so foreign to me. Well, I'll say two things. It's so foreign to me. Maybe I'd say the 1830s, because that was when things were changing fast. I just found, so that's when they decided they had to give street names to the streets and put up street signs.
Wow.
So things were growing fast.
We think having a stoplight in Lunenburg, the first stoplight in my lifetime went in, and 20 years ago that was a big deal. But street signs.
The street signs and and both the very early version of the circus used to come, but they also had agricultural fairs right downtown with all the
Civic Days. Yeah.
Yeah, except it
1.0.
It was bulls and cows and things and horses and
Right.
pulling contests. So maybe that also, we actually do have, it is possible for people to do that kind of time travel, because you were talking about the founders all sitting around and swapping stories.
Yeah.
One of the first activities that they did when they founded the Fitchburg Historical Society was ask some of the oldest people in town to write down their memories of what it was like when they were a kid.
Yeah.
And so people talked about what it was like in, when it was old New England. One of them I was reading, this man remembered when the soldiers were practicing on what was called the Campus Martius, the field where the soldiers all practiced.
Mustered, yeah,
Yeah,
right.
where they mustered
Yep.
and marched and practiced all of those things. He remembered when they were doing that for the War of 1812. And that gave me chills.
Absolutely. I think it's Warren Buffett that has said this, but we forget how young of a nation we are, and it's it's 3 88 or 90-year-old lifetimes in a row. Is the entire history of so we're really one lifetime away from stories like that, which is remarkable.
It really is pretty incredible. That it does. We're always stumbling across things that we're sort of astonished by. How much people are the same, and other ways how much things have changed.
Right.
One of my favorites was to have college students visiting us, and they were researching in our primary sources, because that's the big thing we have, is that we have letters and photos and all kinds of documents as well as artifacts that are 100 and 200 years old. So you're not reading what somebody said about it, you're actually doing the detective work yourself, looking at these.
And so, how can people access those primary documents through the society?
We actually, that's what we do for people. So you have to be able to read them in our place. You don't borrow anything. It's not a library to take out.
Yeah.
But
you got to return these books.
Yes,
Yeah.
But we're open to the public. It's really, there are some people who are historians who are going to write a big thick book, but then it's also for people that want to just learn, see their old yearbook or something like that. And you can actually come in and just say, I want to see what this is like. And just pick something, maybe your church or your school or your neighborhood. And we can pull out the records for you, and you'll see original photos, original documents, people's letters. Now, we won't be able to tell you what it all means, because that's the thing. We're taking care of them.
That's the adventure that you can give them, though.
That's right.
That's
right.
Up to you.
As you're being the Sherlock Holmes in that.
One of my favorite parts of Fitchburg and Leominster is the different ethnic kind of diasporas who came in, and the immigrant communities who are here, whether it's the Italians, the Irish, the French Canadians, up to today, and so many communities from South America. What are some of the great stories that you've learned of these diasporas and their contributions to the city and the region?
Yeah, there's so many. I mean, one of the things that's been really exciting is how people who are descended from those folks come to Fitchburg to visit. I was mentioning to one of your staffers that there was one summer right before COVID where we had 3 different people send us emails, and they were coming from Europe or from the United Kingdom, one from Scotland, I think.
Yeah.
And they said, well, we're coming, my family and I are coming to America this summer, and we're going to visit New York City and Fitchburg. And so we wanted to see, and we
how should we split our time?
Yeah,
right.
And it was great because they asked us, where are the bed and breakfasts and where can we stay? But they would say, do you have any information about our great-grandfather, our grandfather, who came to Fitchburg? Sometimes they came to Fitchburg, then they went back, or maybe it was brothers and things like that. But so they were coming to Fitchburg to see what their own connection to America was. And that was just really exciting for us to see, to be able to show them, oh, this is where your family member lived, and you can go see that house.
And it must be affirming for you just to get just a sense of how important the society's mission is and what an integral role it can play to people. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's just so exciting. The stories about, there's so many different ones. About the different families. I mean, I keep learning more and more about the French Canadian community that came here. And, it's sort of astonishing.
And really settled in Cleghorn, right?
In Cleghorn, yeah. Cleghorn has so many cool stories.
Right.
There's just so many cool ones. And we've had people visit from Quebec too, and it was fun because we were able to greet them in French and tell them some more about their family that came here. oh golly, there's so
And what I love
so
about the
many.
neighborhoods too is like, and this is, not all that long ago, but each neighborhood had their own little haunts. Like whether it's the
Absolutely.
St. Joseph's Club or the Marconi Club. I mean, you name it. I mean, there were the Knights, the American Legion, the AMVETS. I mean, everywhere. There are so many different places that people used to go and gather, and
Absolutely.
and it was tight knit, and it was.
One time I was doing a talk about the Rotary Club of Fitchburg, which was founded a little more than 100 years ago. And so I went and looked at how many clubs were in Fitchburg when they were founded. And there were 163 clubs. And that's not even including the ones that were at the churches or the Masons.
Right.
So everybody was going out to clubs to do stuff every night of the week. And it's really fascinating because as you look back, you realize that there are some ways that people lived a little differently than we do, like that everybody.
And we can learn a lot from them too, right?
Hugely.
Yeah, if we could
That
put our
they
phones
walked
down
to
and
work.
benefit from,
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, the amount that people shared and worked together, and helped each other's families get ahead. So that there are things like. I've learned about. I did a talk once on women's lives and women's history in Fitchburg, and I ended up looking at Clegon and the French Canadian women, and also reading a book that we have about the Italian families in Fitchburg. And when people came, everybody in the family was working hard. Often the dad would have a job in a factory, the wife would have a job in a factory, and so somebody often an aunt would be taking care of the kids,
right?
And I think that in exchange she was given, she was paid a little
room
bit.
and board, right?
Yeah. And the kids, I have talked to people. The kids got jobs delivering telegrams and newspapers by the time they were 7, 8, and 9. They would start their own little businesses by the time they were 13 and 14.
It was an entrepreneurial community.
Very much, very much. I think that everything really reinforced that because there was so much growth. There were so many people as you said, there were so many different cultural events. There's sports going on everywhere. There, everybody people were walking to Coggeshall Park and Mirror Lake to go skating. There were tow ropes everywhere to go skiing.
Yep.
There were one woman whose family was Sicilian was telling me the story that when her father came here, and he had worked from the time he was maybe 13 years old, and so
which was a late start back then, right? Yeah.
I mean, it was very normal.
Child labor laws were a little bit different.
It was very normal to start working that much, and then they got here, and their family was very hardworking, entrepreneurial, and moved into the middle class, and so he had never gone to high school, but Fitchburg High School's football team became his team, and he went to the games, and then every Thanksgiving he made sure to go out and see the game, and it was a big, big celebration for them.
Sure.
And that was his team. That was just, deeply, deeply connected to his community and everything. And that was part of his becoming an American for him and for her, that
right.
He became a big football fan for that. And, it's sort of that story is reproduced all over
and over again.
Over and over,
So you've been at the society for 10 years now.
Yes.
Can you talk about, what has changed and where you've taken it, and then where you'd like to take the society over the next 10 years?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, so what has changed?
And you have the most beautiful headquarters of anywhere.
We're very proud of it. Yeah, when I moved in, we had just moved into it. So we're in the old Phoenix building on Main Street.
And what's the history of that building?
So that building, we're only the second owner. The first owner was the Fitchburg Mutual Fire Insurance Company.
Gotcha.
And so they were there for over 100 years. And it's called the Phoenix Building because the phoenix is the bird that rises out of the flames, so that's appropriate for a fire insurance company. And if you look at it, it's at 781 Main Street at the Upper Common, and it's really beautifully designed.
Right.
Yeah, and it's very well taken care of, and we work hard on that. So then when the insurance company was moving out, we had to figure out whether we were going to renovate our building on Grove Street, which was quite tiny for who we were and the size of our collections, or would we move to something bigger? And so we did purchase that building, and some extraordinary people at the Historical Society stepped up and raised the money to be able to renovate it for modern usage. And so the things that have changed is that we hadn't really had exhibitions before. We had just set a couple up before I got there, and in the 10 years since, we've done a number of changing exhibitions about firefighting in Fitchburg, medicine, law and justice, Ivor Johnson, and their bicycles.
I know my grandfather Joe's been busy with Civil War research.
Yeah, he's been doing Civil War research. We've had a couple of Civil War shows, and now we're doing a lot of programming around it. So we used the space that we have to do more exhibitions and changing exhibitions, and to do a lot of public events. And where we want to go, well, we still have a lot of work to do on the upstairs on taking care of the collection, storing it in a really modern and professional way. It's as I said, it's a very well-known collection.
Yeah.
And it dates back to some very early things. So it's getting pretty big. So we need to take care of that and create some more public spaces.
Which is exciting, certainly.
It's super exciting. It's big projects, but you know what's been happening too is that we have broadened the number of people involved hugely, because I'm very proud that on FATV I did a TV show that was in Spanish about the Uruguayan community, and our board members who are Spanish speaking really want to create a show about the history of the Puerto Rican community in Fitchburg and the Dominican, to get more collections and more stories from people that we haven't heard from yet because they came in the last 50 years or so.
Yeah, absolutely.
And actually, that really pushed us. It pushed us when COVID happened, suddenly to figure out, okay, what can we do if people can't come into our building? And we increased the social media that we have. There are almost 5,000 people who are on Facebook talking about Fitchburg history.
Which is a great way to reach people, right? Yeah, there's a lot of negative consequences from social media, but this isn't one of them.
It's been amazing.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing is that people, I think a lot of people there that are watching probably know this, that if someone has moved away from Fitchburg, they miss it. They miss it a lot because it's such a close and fun community. And so what has happened is a lot of people who live elsewhere now join it, and they're able to connect with today's Fitchburg people and see all these wonderful old photos we have in the old stories.
And I see this on my feed too, but what I love is somebody will post a picture from a police officer at a diner in 1932, and people say that's Charlie Cook or whoever, and they'll be calling out their their old teachers or people that they know.
Exactly,
which is pretty special.
It really helps. We connect people, and I have to say that sometimes we put mystery photos up there saying, do you know who this is? And can you help us
out?
And we really learn a lot from it. And I'm trying to gather some of that information and put it into our newsletter too. We're definitely gathering it to put into our records because people tell us their own stories. So the other thing that happened during COVID is that because we were closed off, we had a little more time to follow up on something that people had asked us to do, which was to have
some of those long-term projects,
yes,
right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's always a challenge because you've got the short-term things, people asking us for help on one specific question.
Yeah.
But a lot of people had wanted to see a TV show again about Fitchburg's history. There was one, Ann O'Connor did one a long time ago, and Joy Contoy. And so they said, you should do that again. And so we've started creating one here at FATV, and we've had some things donated to us to show on Fitchburg.
There's no shortage of material, right?
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
You'll be able to run for a lot of seasons.
Yes, exactly.
So the mission of the society is really to look back, right, to protect and preserve the history. But there's so many things going on in the city right now that I think are really profound reasons to be optimistic. New housing development. There's so much going on. The theater block. What makes you excited about the city's future?
Wow, you're right, everything. I mean, perhaps the most exciting thing for me is that we keep hearing from people who are opening businesses or renovating their business, and they want to know more about the history of the place that they're in, the businesses that were there, and lots of homes. You know, there's so many people who are finding beautiful homes in Fitchburg that they couldn't even imagine having. You know, they've always wanted to have a place that was historic. They were always loved older homes, and they can't afford it if you're out in Malden.
10 miles to our east. Yeah, absolutely. It's out of reach.
And so they are moving here, and they are really enthused about getting involved with Fitchburg. And so they come in and they find pictures of their place and the stories of the people that lived there before. And sometimes we're able to connect them. We just had this recently that I was able to connect some people who are in their 20s who had just bought a house with a man who'd grown up there. He was a child living there back in the 40s. I think it was in the 40s, so maybe 50s. And so, you know, just so nifty that we can connect people.
Certainly.
And that's something that we love doing in our space, too, at all of our special events, or when people are in researching, is that people end up talking with each other about what they're working on.
And making connections that you would never presume could happen.
Yeah.
So with the couple minutes we have left, how can people support the society? How can they get involved? And what's the best way to get in touch?
Oh, super. Well, you can contact us. You can call us at 978-345-1157. And please do follow us on Facebook if you use it, or take a look at our web page and things. I think the best thing is to not be scared to just drop in. It's really great. You can come and just look at a little part of the exhibition.
Good place to pooch around, right?
Yes, exactly. And, you know, to do it over and over again, we've got volunteers who will answer questions for you. But if you want to just see what kind of thing I'm talking about, you don't have to be doing any serious research. You could just say, okay, I've got an hour or maybe 3 hours, but I've got some time. Can I look at pictures of my, information about my school or about my street?
And you'll never know what might pique your interest too, right? I mean, there's so many different, avenues to research or questions to answer. And it's a good place to be curious.
That happens for our volunteers and for all of us who are there, our board members too, that when we're looking through things, we always find something that surprises us. And I would say we don't know everything that's in our records. That is, we haven't read them all. It's more than one person could possibly read, so you might discover something for us. The other thing I'll mention is that despite our name, people might think that we're part of the city or something, but we're not. We're an independent nonprofit that was started by a bunch of people who wanted to create an institution, an educational institution for fun for people in Fitchburg. So we really depend on our membership. So if somebody comes in, they want to become a member, even give us a $5 or $10 donation.
It adds up, right?
It's very important for us. So please consider just dropping by and seeing what it's like, because you don't have to be able to give it a lot of time, because what happens is you'll fall in love with it, and then when you're retired or some other reason, you'll be back.
Good. And what's on deck? So what are some upcoming events that we can let people know about?
We have, so on first Thursday in April, we're going to have an appreciation of Carolyn Atherton Mason, who is a poet of the Civil War era from Fitchburg. And that's going to be actually at Mill Street Stage, and some local poets are going to be reading their poetry too. So you just come in and listen to the poetry, or if you're a poet, you can bring yours. So
Dr. Joe Cronin, maybe?
Yeah, that would be...
He's been doing a lot of poetry reading. He calls me...
He has been.
So my grandfather's 90. He calls me every Monday and invites me to come over to the Gables where he lives and read poetry, and it's, Papa, I got a job. I can't, can't be doing these poetry jams every Monday at noon.
Exactly. But I think he is going to read one of the historic poems there. And that's on April 6th. And then coming up in May, on May 16th, actually another Cronin, Edward Cronin, who is the chief of police, has written a book called Just Policing. And he and his co-author are going to be talking about it and about the history of Fitchburg around 2000, when he was the chief of police. So I'm really excited.
So no shortage of opportunities.
Yeah.
We're at time. Thank you so much for a great interview and for all you do to serve the city and protect not just its past, but really inspire its future too. So thank you, Susan.
Thank you so much for having me.
You bet.